Old age has a strange way of teaching you things. Not loudly, not with anger, but slowly, like rain falling at night. I used to think all my children would always call this house home. I believed it with my whole heart. After all, I built this place brick by brick. I planted the mango tree in the yard when my eldest son was just 5. I marked their heights on the kitchen wall with a pencil. I thought memories were strong enough to hold people in place. But I was wrong. Now, at 72, I sit by the same window where I once waited for my husband to return from work. The house is quiet. The clock ticks loudly. Even the walls seem to breathe slower than before. Sometimes I hear footsteps in my mind. Children running. Doors opening. Laughter spilling into the hallway. But when I open my eyes, it is only silence. You see, old age does not hurt because of the wrinkles. It hurts because it shows you who still remembers the way back home. Not everyone does. And I did not learn this lesson in one day. It came slowly, through missed calls, through canceled visits, through festivals that became smaller and quieter, through the day I realized some children come home only when they need something. I am not telling this story to complain. I am telling it because maybe someone listening tonight is also sitting near a window, waiting that I had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. My eldest son, Arif, was serious even as a child. He liked things neat. His school books were always covered in brown paper. He would sit quietly at the table and finish his homework before playing. My second son, Samir, was softer. He laughed easily. He would run to me after school and tell me every small detail of his day. And my daughter, Amina, she was my shadow. She followed me into the kitchen. She learned how to knead dough before she learned how to braid her own hair. Those were busy years. My husband worked long hours at the factory. Money was not much, but we never slept hungry. I stitched clothes for neighbors to earn a little extra. Some nights I stayed awake until midnight, sewing under a yellow bulb. But I never felt tired, because when I looked at my children sleeping side by side on the floor mattress, I felt rich. Dinner time was always my favorite. We all sat together. No one ate alone. My husband would ask about school. The boys would argue about cricket. Amina would quietly pass the water glasses. That table felt like the center of the world. I believed it would always be like that. But time moves quietly. Arif finished college first. He got a job in the city. I still remember the day he packed his suitcase. It was not very big. Just some shirts, his certificates, and the watch his father gave him. "Amy, I will come every weekend," he said. I smiled. "Of course, Beta. This is your home." He did come. At first. Every Saturday evening, he would knock loudly on the door. I would pretend not to be waiting, but my heart would already be near the gate before my feet were. Then his visits became twice a month. Then once. Then mostly during festivals. I told myself this is normal. Children grow. They build their own lives. Still, every time he left, the house felt slightly bigger. And slightly emptier. Samir moved out 2 years later. He got married before Arif did. His wife, Nadia, was polite, quiet. She touched my feet on the first day. They rented a small apartment nearby. I was happy they were close. But nearby does not always mean present. Samir visited, yes, but mostly when something needed to be fixed in the house. Or when he wanted to borrow money for a short time. He would sit for tea, look at his phone, say, "Amy, we are a little busy these days." I always nodded. "Of course, Beta. Life is busy." I never wanted to be a burden. Amina stayed the longest. She married at 26 and moved to another town. The day she left, I did not cry in front of her. I held her face and said, "Your husband's home is your first home now." But when the car turned the corner, I went inside and sat on her empty bed. The pillow still smelled like her hair oil. That was the first time I felt the house truly silent. Pause. Piano gently swells. Years passed. My husband retired. We grew slower together. We drank tea in the evenings and watched the sky change colors. Then one winter morning, he did not wake up. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Just like that, I became alone in this house. I thought my children would gather around me more after that. For a few weeks, they did. Arif came with his wife. Samir stayed overnight. Amina called every night. But grief also fades for the young. They return to their routines. And I stayed here. With memories. With the ticking clock. With the mango tree that now grows taller than the roof. That I am not angry at them. Please understand that. Children do not stop loving their parents. They just get pulled into their own storms. But old age is a quiet season. And in quiet seasons, you notice who still knocks on your door. After my husband passed away, the house changed. Not in its shape. Not in its walls. But in its feeling. It felt larger. And I felt smaller inside it. For the first few months, my children called often. Amy, did you eat? Amy, are you taking your medicine? I would smile into the phone and say, yes, yes, I am fine. And I was fine. Mostly. But calls are not the same as footsteps. Voices through a phone cannot replace the sound of a cup being placed on the table. Still, I told myself not to expect too much. Children have their own responsibilities. One morning, I slipped slightly near the sink. It was nothing serious. Just a small fall. But for a few seconds, I stayed on the floor. Not because I could not get up, but because I realized no one would know if I stayed there longer. The house did not react. The walls did not shout. And that scared me more than the fall. That evening, I told Arif on the phone. Oh, Amy, you must be careful, he said quickly. I could hear traffic behind him. Yes, Beta. Maybe we should hire someone to check on you. I don't need a stranger, I replied softly. There was a small silence. Okay, Amy. I have a meeting now. I will call later. He did not call later. It was not cruelty. Just life moving too fast. The first big festival after my husband's death was difficult. I cleaned the house 2 days before. Washed the curtains. Polished the steel plates. I cooked their favorite dishes. Arif liked mutton curry. Samir preferred sweet rice. Amina loved fried bread with sugar. I cooked everything. The kitchen was warm. The smell of spices filled the air. For a moment, I felt alive again. Arif called in the afternoon. Amy, we may come a little late. That's fine, I said. Evening came. Then night. Samir sent a message. Nadia's parents invited us this year. We will come tomorrow. Tomorrow. I sat at the dining table alone that night. The plates were arranged for 4. The food grew cold slowly. I did not cry. I simply packed the leftovers into containers. The next day, only Samir came. For 1 hour. Arif sent sweets through a driver. Amina called and said, Amy, tickets were too expensive this time. I said, it's okay, Beatty. Don't worry. And I meant it. But that was the first time I understood something small. Home had become optional. Soft rain outside. Window scene. Weeks passed. Then months. Visits became shorter. Conversations became quicker. Sometimes I would call, and the phone would ring and ring. Then later, a message would come. Sorry, Amy was busy. Busy, it is such a small word. But it can create a big distance. One Sunday, Arif came unexpectedly. I was happy. He walked through the room slowly. Amy, this house is too big for you. It has always been this size, I replied. Yes, but now you are alone. I poured tea for him. He looked at the cracked pane on the wall. You could sell it, he said casually. The cup paused in my hand. Sell? Yes. You could move into a smaller apartment. Or even stay with us sometimes. Sometimes. I nodded slowly. I knew he meant well. But this house, it is not just walls. It is every scraped knee. Every exam result. Every birthday candle. How do you sell that? I did not answer him that day. Later that week, Samir came too. He sat in the living room and said, Buy is right, Amy. Maintenance is costly. Property prices are high now. I looked at him carefully. Are you worried about me? He hesitated. We just think it's practical. Practical. Another small word. It felt heavy in my chest. For them, it was property. For me, it was memory. Pause. Clock ticking louder. I began to notice something else. When they visited, their conversations often turned to the future. Not my future. The house's future. Who will get which part? Samir once joked lightly. I laughed too. But inside, something shifted. Was I becoming a responsibility? Or an obstacle? I pushed those thoughts away. A mother should not doubt her children. Still, the doubts came quietly at night. Amina called more often than the boys. She would talk for 20 minutes sometimes. But even she had changed. Amy, you must think about moving closer to one of us. I am fine here. But what if something happens? Something already happened, I wanted to say. Your father is gone. The house is silent. But I kept quiet. Because mothers protect their children from worry. Even when they're the ones who are worried. Then one day, something small happened. But small things sometimes reveal big truths. I had saved some money over the years. Not much. Just little amounts from sewing, from careful spending that I wanted to repair the roof before the monsoon. I mentioned it to Samir. He said, Amy, why waste money on repairs if you might sell? I smiled gently. It is still my house. He did not reply. Instead, he changed the topic. That was the moment I understood something. They were already thinking ahead. Ahead of me. As if I were a chapter that would close soon. I am not blaming them. Please do not misunderstand me. Children do not plan to hurt their parents. They just begin to see life differently. They see numbers, value, practical choices. And old age sees memories. I began to test something quietly. I stopped calling first. Just to see. Days passed. 3 days. 5 days. A week. No one called. Then finally, Amina. Amy. I was meaning to call. I said nothing about the silence. I simply said, I know, Beatty. After that, Samir called 2 days later. Arif called after 10 days. For the first time in my life, I counted how long my children could go without hearing my voice. It is a strange thing counting absence. One evening, as I sat by the window, the neighbor's grandson ran past the gate. He shouted, Dottie, catch me. His grandmother laughed loudly. Their house was noisy, full. I felt happy for her, and a little empty for myself. Old age does not shout its lessons. It whispers them, and it was beginning to whisper to me. Not all children forget, but not all children remember either. And I was about to learn which ones still called it home. The real turning point did not arrive with shouting. There were no harsh words. No door slammed. It came quietly, like everything else in old age. It was the day my children asked me to sign the papers to IT was monsoon season. Rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm. The sky was gray, and the mango tree bent slightly in the wind. Arif called that morning. Amy, we're coming over. All of us. All of us. That made me happy. It had been months since all three were in the same room together. I made tea. I cut some fruit. I even took out the good cups, the ones I used only when guests came. I did not know I was about to feel like a guest in my own house. They arrived together. Arif first. Then Samir and Nadia. Amina last, holding her handbag close to her. I manage, I said softly. Yes, but still, Amina added, we think it would be better if you move somewhere smaller. Maybe closer to one of us. I looked around the room. The clock on the wall. The framed photo of their father. The small crack near the ceiling. Why now? I asked quietly. Arif took a deep breath. There is a good buyer interested. The price is high. It is a good opportunity. Opportunity. The rain outside felt heavier. I did not speak for a few seconds. Then Arif placed a folder on the table. These are just initial papers. Nothing urgent. But his eyes told me it was urgent. I opened the folder slowly. My name was written there. The house address. So many official words. I could not read all of them clearly without my glasses. Have you already decided? I asked. They exchanged glances. We are thinking long-term, Amy, Samir said. It is practical. Practical. That word again. I felt very small in that moment. Not because they wanted to sell, but because they had discussed it many times without me. They had planned, calculated, prepared. And I was just being informed. A mother who once made every decision for her children was now the last to know about her own home. Where would I go? I asked calmly. Arif answered quickly. You can rotate between us. Rotate. Like furniture. Like luggage. Stay 3 months here. 3 months there. I looked at Amina. She avoided my eyes. The room felt cold. In that silence, memories rushed into me. Arif taking his first steps across this very floor. Samir crying when he broke his arm near the staircase. Amina sleeping beside me during thunderstorms. This house had heard every whisper of our lives. And now it was being discussed like a market item. Still, I did not shout. I did not accuse. I simply asked one question. If I say no? The room became very quiet. Arif spoke carefully. We just want what is best for everyone. Everyone, not just me. I understood then. This was not only about safety. It was about division, future inheritance, convenience. I was not blind. Old age may move slowly, but it sees clearly. They left the papers with me. Think about it. Amina said gently. We will come next week. When the door closed behind them, the house felt different. Not empty. Wounded. I walked from room to room, touched the walls, the dining table, the kitchen counter where I had rolled thousands of pieces of dough. Am I holding on too tightly? I asked myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being stubborn. But then another thought came. If I leave this house, where do my memories live? Do they travel in suitcases? Do they rotate every 3 months too? That night, I did not sleep. I sat near the window and watched the rain until morning. And then, I made a decision. Not about the house, but about my children. I would test something again. One last time. The next morning I called them one by one. My voice was calm. I will think about selling, I told them. There was relief in their voices. But first, I continued. I want something. What, Amy? Samir asked. I want each of you to stay here with me. Alone. For 1 week. Silence. Alone. Arif repeated. Yes. 1 week. Just you and me. No spouses. No children. No work excuses. Live here like before. They hesitated. It's difficult with office, Arif said. Children have school, Samir added. Amina said nothing. I smiled softly. Then perhaps the house is not the problem. I did not say it angrily, just gently. After some discussion, they agreed. Not happily, but they agreed. Arif would come first. Then Samir. Then Amina. 3 weeks. 3 chances. I wanted to see something. Not who loved me. I already knew they loved me. I wanted to see who still felt this was home. Arif arrived with his laptop. He sat up at the dining table. The same table where he once did his homework. He worked long hours, ate quickly, took calls in English I barely understood. At night, I tried to talk. Do you remember climbing the mango tree? He smiled faintly. Yes, Amy. Those days were different. Different. He slept in his old room. But he changed nothing inside it. He did not open old drawers. Did not look at childhood photos. On the 4th night, he said, Amy, the city feels far from here. Is that bad? I asked. He paused. It feels disconnected. Disconnected. On the 7th day, he hugged me. Think carefully about the house, he said. And left early in the morning. Samir came next. He brought sweets. He tried harder. He sat with me in the evenings. But he kept checking his phone. On the 3rd day, he said, Nadia is struggling alone. On the 5th day, he suggested, maybe we should not delay selling. He slept late, woke up late. The house did not wake him up the way it once did. When he left, he said, Do what makes sense, Amy. Makes sense. Amina came last. She entered quietly. She touched the doorframe before stepping in. Something in my chest softened. The first night, she opened old cupboards. She found her school notebooks, her old hair ribbons. She laughed softly. Amy, You kept everything. Yes, I said. We cooked together in the kitchen. Just like before. On the fourth day, she cried suddenly while washing dishes. I miss Abo, she whispered.
So did I.
She slept in my room one night, like she used to during storms. And on the last evening, she sat beside me and said something I will never forget. Amy, this house still feels like it is breathing. Breathing, not property, not investment. Breathing. When the 3 weeks ended, I had my answer. I did not need arguments. I did not need explanations. Old age had shown me quietly. Some children remember the address. Some children remember the feeling. And those are not the same thing. The turning point was not the papers.
It was the week that followed.
Because in those days I saw clearly
Who still called.
At home, after those 3 weeks, the house felt different. Not because anything had changed on the outside. The walls were the same. The mango tree still leaned toward the sun. The clock still ticked with steady patience. But inside me something had settled. I was no longer confused. I was no longer hurt in the same way. I had seen clearly. And clarity in old age is a quiet gift. At a few days later, I called all 3 of them again.
Come on Sunday, I said.
We will talk. They arrived in the afternoon. The sky was bright that day.
No rain. No clouds.
We sat at the same dining table. The folder with the papers was still there. Untouched. Arif looked serious. Samir looked cautious. Amina looked worried. I poured tea. For everyone. My hands did not shake. I have thought about it. I began. They leaned forward slightly. I will not sell the house. Silence. It was not an angry silence. It was heavy. Arif opened his mouth, then closed it. Samir spoke first. Amy, we discussed. I know, I said gently. And I listened. I looked at each of them. This house is not just a building. It is your childhood. It is your father's laughter. It is my life. No one interrupted me. I will stay here as long as I can manage. If one day I cannot, then we will talk again. But that day is not today. Arif sighed softly. We only worry about you. I know, Beta.
And I meant it.
I truly did. Then I added something they did not expect. But I have another idea. They looked confused. I want this house to remain open. Not locked. Not sold.
Open.
Samir frowned slightly. What do you mean? I said calmly. This house will always be here. For any of you. Any time. Not for money. Not for division. Just as home. Amina's eyes filled with tears. Arif looked down at the table. I will write it clearly, I continued. After I am gone, the house will not be sold immediately. It will remain for 10 years. For your children. For gatherings. For memories. Samir looked surprised. That may reduce its market value. I smiled gently. Not everything valuable is measured in market price. The room became quiet again. But this time, it felt softer. After they left, Amina stayed behind. She stood in the hallway, touching the wall lightly. Amy, she said softly, are you angry with us?
No, Betty.
Then why does it feel like we failed you? I held her hand. You did not fail me. You are living your lives. That is what I raised you to do. She lowered her head. But we forgot how it feels here. I nodded. That happens. She hugged me tightly. For a moment, I felt her heartbeat against mine. That was enough. That in the weeks that followed, something subtle shifted. Not dramatically. Not suddenly.
But slowly.
Arif began calling more regularly. Short calls. But steady. Samir started coming every other Sunday. Sometimes with Nadia. Sometimes alone. Amina sent letters. Yes, letters. Handwritten. She said it felt more personal than messages. I kept each one in a small wooden box. The house did not become noisy again. It did not return to the past. But it stopped feeling forgotten. One night, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Not strong, but enough to scare me. For a moment I thought, this is it. I sat on the edge of my bed and breathed slowly. And then something surprising happened. Before I could even pick up the phone, there was a knock at the door.
Samir.
I had a strange feeling, he said quietly. I thought I should check on you. I did not tell him about the pain. I simply said, come in. We sat in the kitchen at midnight, drinking warm milk, not saying much. But that night, the silence did not feel empty. It felt shared. Old age also teaches another lesson. You cannot control how much others love you. You can only choose how much you hold on. I stopped testing them. I stopped counting days between calls. I stopped measuring their visits. Instead, I began doing small things for myself. I joined a local women's group at the community center. We met twice a week. We shared stories, recipes,
Complaints about knee pain.
It felt good to laugh again. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's responsibility. Just as myself. A month later, I met with a lawyer. Not to sell the house, but to write my wishes clearly. I divided my savings equally. I wrote about the house remaining untouched for 10 years. And I added one more line. This house belongs to whoever walks into it with love. The lawyer smiled at that. Very poetic, he said. It is not poetry, I replied. It is truth. One evening, as the sun set behind the mango tree, Arif visited again. We sat on the veranda. He looked older than before. Tired. Amy, he said quietly, sometimes I forget where I started. I did not answer immediately. Then I said, that is why homes exist. So you can remember. He nodded slowly. I am glad you did not sell. So was. The resolution was not dramatic. No one apologized loudly. No one cried on their knees. Life does not work like that. But something gentle changed. My children began to see the house not as a future asset, but as a living memory. And I began to see them not as neglectful, but as distracted by their own storms. Old age did not take away my children. It simply showed me who still felt rooted here. And roots are quiet things. They do not shout. They simply hold. The story is not about selling or not selling. It is about remembering, about understanding, about accepting that love changes shape, but does not always disappear. And sometimes you must stand calmly in your truth, so others can see it too. I am 72 now. My steps are slower. My hands tremble sometimes when I pour tea. But my heart, it feels lighter than it did a year ago. Because I stopped expecting love to look the way it once did. And I started recognizing it in the ways it quietly shows up. The house is still standing. The paint is still slightly cracked near the ceiling. The mango tree still drops fruit in the summer. Sometimes I sit on the veranda and watch neighborhood children run past the gate. They shout. They laugh. Their voices echo in the same way my children's voices once did. And instead of feeling pain, I feel gratitude. Because I had that time. Not everyone does. Arif calls every Sunday evening now. Not always for long. Sometimes just 5 minutes. But he calls. He asks, Amy, what did you cook today? I tell him, even if I only made simple rice. Samir visits twice a month. He fixes small things in the house. A loose hinge. A broken light. He does not talk much. But sometimes he stays longer than necessary. As if he is remembering something he cannot name. Amina sends letters still. Her handwriting is messy. Just like when she was in school. In her last letter, she wrote, Amy, when I close my eyes, I can still hear you in the kitchen. I read that line many times. Then I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box. Old age did not teach me which child loves me more. It taught me which child still feels the pull of home. There is a difference. Love can live anywhere, but home lives in the heart. Some children carry it with them. Some forget it for a while, and some need time to remember. But you cannot force memory. You can only keep the door open. I no longer fear the future the way I did. If one day I must leave this house, I will. Not because I was pushed, but because the time has come naturally. There is a big difference between being forced to let go and choosing peace. For now, the house breathes with me. In the mornings, sunlight stretches across the floor. In the evenings, shadows move gently along the walls. At night, the clock ticks steadily. And I do not feel alone in its sound anymore. Because I know something now. Silence does not mean abandonment. Sometimes it simply means life is happening elsewhere. Last month, all 3 children came together again.
No papers.
No discussions about selling. Just dinner. We sat at the same old table. Arif laughed loudly at one of Samir's jokes. Amina spilled water like she used to.
For a moment, it felt like the past.
Not fully, but enough. When they left, Arif paused at the gate. He touched the mango tree lightly, just for a second. And in that small gesture, I saw it. He still remembered. If you are listening to this tonight, maybe you are a parent, maybe you are a child, maybe you are somewhere in between. I want you to know something simple. Do not measure love only by presence. Do not measure worth only by usefulness. And do not treat a home like it is just property. Homes carry pieces of us. They hold our beginnings. And sometimes, when life becomes too loud, we need a place that reminds us who we were before the noise. Old age taught me patience. It taught me not to beg for attention. It taught me to stand quietly in my truth. And most importantly, it taught me that doors should remain open, but hearts must remain peaceful. Tonight, as I sit by this window again, I do not wait the way I used to. I do not count days. I do not test silence.
Y simply sit.
And if a call comes, I answer. If a knock sounds, I open. If neither happens, I still breathe calmly. Because I know something now. Home is not about who stays every day. It is about who still feels something when they walk through the door. And that is enough. And so, this is where my story rests. Not with anger, not with regret, but with understanding. Old age did not make me weaker. It made me clearer. It showed me that love changes shape as years pass. It becomes quieter, less dramatic, more subtle. Sometimes love is a long phone call.
Sometimes it is a short visit.
Sometimes it is just a hand touching an old tree before leaving. And sometimes love is simply knowing the door is still open. If you are a parent listening tonight, please remember, your worth is not measured by how often your children visit. And if you are a child listening, please remember, one day, the house that raised you may grow silent. Visit before silence becomes memory. Call before time becomes regret. Homes are not just walls and roofs. They are the places where we first learned how to belong. And no matter how far life takes us, there should always be one place that still feels like breathing. Tonight, I will turn off the lights. I will close the windows. I will whisper a small prayer for my children. And I will sleep peacefully. Because I know now, some still call it home.